Jax's revenge domain. The server room went silent at 600 hours on a Monday morning. That sound or lack of it hit me like a gut punch. For 15 years, I'd walked into that room and heard the steady hum of cooling fans keeping our payroll systems running. Without those servers, 14,500 construction workers across 4 states don't get their paychecks on Friday. And when construction workers don't get paid, they don't send polite emails. They park their equipment and walk off the job. I'm Marcus Sullivan. Mac to everyone who matters. 54 years old, Navy veteran, and I've been running payroll operations at Atlas Construction Enterprises since this company was half its current size. I keep the financial backbone of this operation running like a well-oiled supply chain, making sure every concrete pourer in Houston and every crane operator in Phoenix gets every penny they've earned, exactly when they've earned it. Let me tell you something about construction payroll. It's not like cutting checks for office workers. These guys climb steel beams 20 stories up. They pour concrete in 110-degree heat. They work weekends when storms knock out power lines and people need electricity back. My own daughter Sarah operates a crane at our Phoenix site. She's 28, tough as nails, and reminds me every day why this job matters. When I look at those payroll numbers, I'm not seeing data points. I'm seeing Sarah's crew, guys who depend on accurate paychecks to feed their families. The system I maintain isn't some fancy cloud-based solution that some sales brochure promises. It's a fortress built on military-grade redundancy, custom protocols, and 15 years of modifications I've made with the precision of a Navy logistics officer keeping an aircraft carrier supplied. Triple redundancy. That's how we kept supply chains running on carriers. Same principle applies here. Primary systems, backup systems, and emergency protocols that kick in when everything else fails. When Arizona changed their prevailing wage laws last year, I had the new calculations running in 72 hours. When OSHA updated their safety reporting requirements, I built the compliance module from scratch while drinking black coffee at 0200. You want complexity? Try calculating overtime for a crew that starts in Texas Monday morning, moves to a job site in New Mexico Wednesday, then finishes the week in Colorado. Different state labor laws, different tax rates, different union contracts. Then add equipment rental tracking, hazard pay for chemical exposure zones, and federal prevailing wages for government contracts. But corporate sees dollar signs where I see mission-critical operations. They see an old system that needs modernizing, and they see me as the expensive guy standing in the way of progress. That's where Preston Whitfield comes in. Preston is our new VP of operations, and more importantly, he's connected to money. 3 months ago, Atlas got acquired by Whitfield Holdings Corporation, one of those construction conglomerates that owns everything from cement plants to equipment rental fleets. Preston came in with a mandate to streamline operations and eliminate redundancies. Translation, fire expensive people and replace them with cheaper solutions. I'd seen Preston around the job sites. He's one of those guys who shows up in a spotless hard hat, stays in his air-conditioned truck, and thinks every business problem can be solved with the right PowerPoint slide. Stanford MBA, never spent a day actually building anything. Never had to explain to a single mother why her paycheck bounced because some calculation went sideways. My wife Linda's been worried about this acquisition since day one. At 52, she understands what corporate restructuring means for guys like me. We've got 7 years until I can retire with full benefits. Healthcare costs aren't getting any cheaper, and starting over at my age isn't exactly appealing. But Linda knows I won't compromise on doing the job right, even if it costs me. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. Preston called me into his office along with Ruth Chambers from HR. Ruth's been here almost as long as I have, but she's always been more worried about protecting the company than protecting the people who actually make it run. She had that look people get when they know they're about to deliver bad news, but have to smile while they do it. Preston's office looked like a corporate magazine spread. Glass desk, leather chairs, and windows overlooking the equipment yard that he probably never actually looked at. He was tapping on his tablet when I walked in, making me wait while he finished whatever earth-shattering task required his immediate attention. Mac, Preston said, not bothering to look up, we're restructuring the payroll department, moving to a more agile, cost-effective model. I sat down in the chair across from his desk. What does that mean for operations? That's where it gets exciting. Preston finally looked up, flashing one of those practice smiles. I want you to meet my niece, Stephanie. She just finished her MBA at Northwestern, and she's developed an innovative solution that's going to revolutionize how we handle payroll. Here's the thing about family businesses. Blood beats competence every single time. I'd seen it before, but I thought our operation was too critical for that kind of thinking. I was wrong. Stephanie Whitfield walked in like she owned the building, which through family connections she basically did. 26 years old, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than most of our crane operators make in a month, carrying an iPad like it was the keys to the kingdom. "Hi, Mac," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've been analyzing your processes. Very thorough, but also very inefficient. I think we can optimize significantly." The way she said inefficient made it sound like I'd been using stone tools and cave drawings. "How's that?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling about where this was heading. Stephanie set her iPad on Preston's desk and started swiping through screens with the confidence of someone who'd never seen a real system crash and burn in real time. "I've built a comprehensive payroll solution in Excel. It's cloud-based, intuitive, and it can handle all the calculations you're currently doing with those legacy databases." I stared at her. "Excel? You want to run payroll for 14,500 construction workers with a spreadsheet?" "Not just any spreadsheet," Stephanie said, getting defensive. "This has pivot tables, conditional formatting, automated macros. It's essentially a database, but user-friendly. That's what they always say when they want to replace something that actually works with something that looks prettier. I've been in this business long enough to know that user-friendly usually means it works great until it doesn't, and then you're dead in the water because nobody understands what's happening under the hood. I looked at Preston, hoping to see some sign that he understood how insane this was. "Is this a joke?" "It's innovation, Mac," Preston said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Stephanie's model can reduce processing time by 60% and cut our IT overhead significantly." There it was, cut overhead. What they meant was they could fire me and pay Stephanie a fraction of my salary. In the Navy, we had a saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But corporate America runs on a different principle. If it works, break it and rebuild it cheaper. "The payroll run is Friday," I said, keeping my voice level. "Today's Tuesday. If you're planning to switch systems, you need to understand the scope of what you're dealing with." I started counting off the complexities on my fingers. "We handle prevailing wage calculations for government contracts, union versus non-union differentials that change based on project type and consecutive days worked, equipment rental tracking cross-referenced with GPS data, OSHA compliance reporting, multi-state tax withholdings where a guy can start the week in Texas and finish it in Colorado, hazard pay calculations that vary by chemical type and proximity, meal penalty tracking for crews working through breaks." Stephanie was nodding like she was following, but I could see her eyes glazing over. She thought she understood because she'd read about payroll in some textbook. But textbooks don't teach you about real-world chaos. They don't prepare you for the call you get at 2 a.m. because a crew in Denver hit a gas line and now 40 guys are working emergency overtime with triple hazard pay multipliers. "I've accounted for all of that," she interrupted. "My model includes lookup tables for all state regulations and automated tax calculations." Lookup tables. The Arizona prevailing wage database alone has 847 different job classifications with rates that change based on which county you're working in. Union contracts have overtime rules that would make a tax lawyer's head spin. You've got guys who get time and a half after 8 hours, double time after 12, but only on certain types of projects. Then there's the meal penalty clause that kicks in if they work more than 5 hours without a break, but the penalty rate changes if it's a weekend or holiday. "Stephanie," I said, trying to keep the condescension out of my voice, "have you ever calculated prevailing wages for a federal highway project?" "I've studied the regulations. Studying and doing are two different things. You know what happens when you get prevailing wages wrong on a federal contract. The Department of Labor audits everything. They can fine us for every hour that was calculated incorrectly going back 3 years. I've seen companies go under because some kid fresh out of college thought they could outsmart the system." Preston waved his hand dismissively. "We'll have compliance reviews." Stephanie's model includes error checking in Excel. Like conditional formatting was going to catch it when some crew foreman in El Paso enters his timesheet wrong and Stephanie's lookup formula returns the wrong wage rate for 40 guys working a government job. Or when daylight saving time shifts and the timestamps get corrupted. Or when someone accidentally deletes a cell and breaks the entire calculation chain. I thought about Sarah working her crane in Phoenix right now, trusting that her paycheck would be right. I thought about the guys I'd trained over the years, good people who deserved better than being guinea pigs for some MBA's thesis project. "Mac," Ruth finally spoke up, "we'll need you to provide Stephanie with all necessary passwords and documentation for a smooth transition documentation." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Most of the critical processes are in custom scripts I wrote over 15 years. The real knowledge isn't documented anywhere. It's in my head. That's the thing about systems that actually work in the real world. They're not built from textbooks. They're built by people who've been doing the job long enough to know where all the problems hide. I know that the time clock system in the Phoenix warehouse has a glitch where it sometimes double stamps entries after 2,300 hours, but only on Wednesdays and only if the network load is high. I know that the union contract for the concrete crews has a clause about meal breaks that nobody else remembers. But if you don't account for it, guys don't get their meal penalty pay. I know that Carlos Mendez in El Paso always submits his timesheets 10 minutes before the deadline, and his internet connection drops out about 30% of the time, so I always call him Thursday afternoon to make sure his crew's hours came through. I know that the state of New Mexico's database goes down for maintenance every third Friday of the month, so I pull all the data the night before. Stephanie doesn't know any of that. She's got her pretty spreadsheet with color-coded cells and fancy formulas, but she's never had to explain to Jake Morrison why his crane operators are showing up as earning less than minimum wage because some calculation went sideways. Then we'll need you to document everything before you go, Preston said, and that's when I knew they'd already made their decision. They weren't asking for my input or trying to understand why their plan was doomed. They were giving me my walking papers and expecting me to train my replacement. When's my last day Friday, Preston said, after the payroll run. We want to ensure a smooth transition. It will be smooth. Stephanie jumped in. I've tested my model extensively. On what data? I asked sample data from the HR system plus theoretical scenarios. Sample data, theoretical scenarios. She'd tested her revolutionary payroll solution on made-up numbers. It was like testing a fighter jet by flying a paper airplane around your living room. I stood up, my knees creaking the way they do when you've been sitting too long or when you're about to make a decision you'll either regret or celebrate. All right then, I guess we'll see how it goes. That's the spirit, Preston said, already looking back at his tablet. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Stephanie. One piece of advice. She looked up from her iPad, probably expecting some technical tip about database connections. When the system crashes, I said, and it will crash, don't panic. Just remember that 14,500 people are counting on their paychecks to pay rent and buy groceries. That might help you prioritize. The look on her face told me she still didn't get it. She thought this was just numbers on a screen. She had no idea she was about to be responsible for people's lives. I didn't argue anymore. Sometimes the best teacher is experience, and Stephanie was about to get an education no MBA program could provide. The next 3 days played out like watching a slow-motion aircraft carrier collision. I spent Wednesday and Thursday doing exactly what they asked, documenting everything I could think of, writing step-by-step procedures, creating user guides. But here's the thing about complex systems that have evolved over 15 years of real-world operation. You can't document institutional knowledge. You can't write down the gut feeling you get when something looks wrong, or the instinct that tells you to double-check a calculation because it seems off by just enough to matter. Stephanie shadowed me those 2 days, taking notes on her iPad and asking questions that showed she was in way over her head. Why do you manually verify the Arizona wage classifications? She asked Wednesday morning as I ran through the pre-payroll checks. Because the state database has been corrupted since 2019, I explained. It shows the right wage rates, but about 3% of the job classifications return wrong county codes. If you don't catch it, guys, working in Phoenix get paid Tucson rates, which is about $4 an hour difference. Can't we just fix the database? It's a state system. We don't control it. We just have to work around it. She made a note on her iPad. I could see her typing something about contacting the state, like that was something she could handle with a phone call. Why don't you automate the backup verification? She asked Thursday afternoon because the backup system uses different table structures. The automation breaks every time the state updates their schema, which they do about twice a year without notice. Manual verification catches discrepancies that automated checks miss. That seems inefficient but accurate. Would you rather have efficient payroll that pays people wrong amounts or inefficient payroll that pays them correctly? She didn't answer that one. Thursday evening, I drove home thinking about calling Sarah. My daughter had texted me that afternoon. Dad, weird rumors floating around the site about payroll changes. Everything okay? I'd told her everything was fine, but I was starting to worry it wouldn't be. At dinner, Linda could see I was bothered. How bad is it really? She asked. Remember when I told you about that construction company in Colorado that went under in 2018? The one where the payroll system failed? They tried to save money by switching to a cheaper system, miscalculated prevailing wages on 3 federal contracts, paid workers wrong rates for 6 months. Department of Labor fined them $4 due $2 million. Company couldn't cover it. Linda set down her fork. Mac, these people aren't going to put 14,500 jobs at risk over some kid's spreadsheet, are they? I wanted to tell her no, but I'd learned not to underestimate corporate stupidity. Preston thinks he's being innovative. Stephanie thinks she's smarter than 15 years of experience. Neither of them understands what happens when you get this stuff wrong. What are you going to do? My job, until Friday. After that, it's not my problem anymore. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. These weren't just employee numbers to me. Sarah was out there, guys I'd worked with for years, guys who trusted that their paychecks would be right. It would always be my problem. Thursday afternoon, Stephanie felt confident enough to start importing real data into her Excel model. I watched her upload the raw time files from our 47 different job sites across 4 states. The spreadsheet immediately started lagging. "It's just loading," she said, clicking refresh repeatedly while Excel ground through 14,500 employee records. But I could see what was happening. Her lookup formulas were hitting circular references because she didn't understand how prevailing wage calculations cascade. When you've got federal, state, and local wage requirements that can all apply to the same job, you can't just use a simple VLOOKUP. You need conditional logic that checks multiple criteria in a specific order. "Stephanie," I said carefully, "you might want to test that on a smaller dataset first." "It'll be fine," she replied. But I could hear uncertainty creeping into her voice as Excel's memory usage spiked and the program started freezing. I started to leave, then stopped. "Stephanie, one more thing. When this goes sideways, and it will go sideways, don't try to fix it by running the calculations again. Each time you reprocess, you create duplicate entries in the system. Fix the problem first, then rerun." She wasn't really listening. She was staring at her screen where the spreadsheet was showing error values in about half the cells. Friday morning arrived like a court date. Stephanie showed up early with her laptop and the kind of nervous energy you see in rookie pilots before their first carrier landing. "Ready to make history?" she asked, trying to sound confident. I gathered my personal items, coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Database Admin," photo of my Harley, and a bottle of bourbon I kept for emergencies. Seemed appropriate to take it with me. Something told me they'd need it more than I would. "Bank cutoff for direct deposits is 1,200 hours, I reminded her. "After that, people don't get paid until Monday." "Got it," Stephanie said, already focused on her screen where Excel was grinding through the payroll data like a wood chipper trying to process a telephone pole. Ruth walked me to the security desk where Eddie Garrison was waiting with my severance paperwork. Eddie's a good guy, ex-Marine, who understands the value of knowing your job inside and out. "Sorry to see you go, Mac," Eddie said as I signed the documents. "This doesn't feel right. It's just business, Eddie. Bad business, but business." I drove home in my pickup truck, windows down, country music on the radio. I should have been angry, but mostly I felt like I was watching a disaster movie where you know the asteroid is going to hit, but the characters haven't figured it out yet. My phone started buzzing around 10:30 hours. Text from Miguel Torres, one of the payroll clerks. "Mac, Stephanie's spreadsheet is showing weird numbers. My overtime calculation says I worked negative hours last week." Then another text from Danny Kowalski in the Phoenix office. "Dude, according to this payroll report, I make $847 an hour as a concrete finisher. I wish." By 100 hours, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Guys from all over our territory were checking their pay stubs in the employee portal and nothing made sense. Employee ID numbers were getting mixed up with social security numbers. Job classifications were scrambled. Crane operators were showing up as office clerks. Concrete finishers were listed as executives. The best one came from Carlos Mendez, a foreman in El Paso. "Mac, my pay stub says I worked 2,847 hours last week and my net pay is $12,000. Did I win the lottery or is the company having a breakdown?" I could picture exactly what had happened. During data import, Stephanie had mixed up the column headers. Employee ID numbers were being used as hours worked, and hours worked were being treated as pay rates. Excel was trying to calculate wages using social security numbers as multipliers, but the real disaster was still coming. The weird numbers in the employee portal were just the opening act. The main event would be at 1,200 hours when the bank tried to process Stephanie's payroll file for electronic deposits. At 1,145 hours, my phone rang. Ruth from HR, her voice tight with panic. "Mac, we need to talk. Stephanie's payroll file is showing irregularities. According to her calculations, we owe the federal government $2.3 million in tax withholdings this week, but we only collected $180,000 from employee paychecks." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck, listening to Ruth explain how Stephanie's Excel model had essentially created a mathematical black hole. Also, Ruth continued, the bank is questioning why we're trying to direct deposit $47,000 to one concrete mixer in Albuquerque while simultaneously deducting $23,000 from a crane operator's pay for something called equipment rental recovery fees. Has anyone told Preston yet? He's in meetings all day. Stephanie said she could fix it. She's been rerunning the calculations trying to patch it. But now she's saying some of the original source files are gone. Looks like she overwrote them when she reloaded the import. There it was. I'd warned her specifically not to reprocess without fixing the problem first. She'd panicked, done exactly what I told her not to do, and wiped out the only copy of the raw payroll data she had access to. What she didn't know was that I'd built backup transaction logs on systems she'd never been shown. Military-grade redundancy, always have a fallback. Famous last words, I said. By 1400 hours, Atlas Construction wasn't a construction company anymore. It was ground zero for a payroll apocalypse. The bank had rejected Stephanie's payroll file so hard it probably left scorch marks on their servers. According to their automated response, we were attempting to transfer invalid amounts to invalid accounts using invalid routing protocols. The employee portal had crashed under the weight of 14,500 workers trying to figure out why their pay stubs looked like they'd been written by a drunk accountant, having a nervous breakdown. But the real fireworks started when the union got involved. Jake Bull Morrison has been representing construction workers for 20 years. He's built like a linebacker, talks like a drill sergeant, and has zero patience for corporate nonsense. Like me, Jake's a veteran Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan. When his guys don't get paid, Jake doesn't send strongly worded emails. He shuts things down. By 1500 hours, Jake was standing on the tailgate of a pickup truck outside our main office with a megaphone, and equipment was lining up behind him. Atlas Construction thinks they can play games with working people's paychecks, his voice boomed across the parking lot. If they can't figure out how to pay us, maybe we should stop working for them. The Wildcat strike spread faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Phoenix sites shut down first, then Albuquerque, then the highway project outside Denver. By 1600 hours, every Atlas Construction job site in 4 states had gone quiet. 14,500 workers sitting in their trucks, posting videos on social media, calling local news stations. Sarah called me that evening, worried. Dad, we're all sitting here in the parking lot. Jake says we're not going back until this gets fixed. Is this really as bad as everyone's saying? It's bad, honey, but it's not your fault, and it's not permanent. Some of the guys are talking about looking for other work. This makes the company look incompetent. That hit me harder than the firing had. These people trusted Atlas. They trusted that their paychecks would be right, that the company knew what it was doing. Now Stephanie's Excel disaster was making them question everything. Tuesday morning, I was sitting on my porch drinking coffee and reading news articles about our payroll crisis when my phone rang. Preston Whitfield. Mac, his voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. We need to talk. Morning, Preston. Saw you on the news last night. Nice interview. I especially liked the part where you said the problems were caused by unforeseen technical complications during a routine system upgrade. Cut the jokes. The state labor board is opening investigations in 4 states. The union is talking about a class action lawsuit. The bank froze our operating accounts because our payroll file triggered their fraud detection system. Sounds like quite a situation. I need you to come back. Consulting basis? Name your price. I'd been waiting for this call since Friday afternoon. $20,000 cash up front, plus a new contract at double my old salary. Done. I'm not finished. I want a public apology from you and Stephanie posted on the company website, admitting that the payroll problems were caused by premature implementation of an inadequate system. Long silence. Fine. And one more thing. I report directly to the CIO now, not to operations. I'm done dealing with people who think Excel is enterprise software. Whatever you need, Mac, just fix this. I drove back to the office Wednesday morning. The parking lot still had union guys camped out, but they waved when they saw my truck. Jake Morrison walked over as I was getting out. Mac, tell me you're here to save our asses. Working on it, Jake. You guys should see some action by Thursday morning. What about back pay for the time we've been sitting here? Every penny, with overtime for the guys who were scheduled to work. The server room felt like coming home after a long deployment. I fired up my workstation and started digging through the wreckage Stephanie had left behind. She'd wiped the active payroll files completely when she panicked and kept rerunning her broken import. But she hadn't known about the backup transaction logs, archives I'd built on isolated systems from day one. The same way the Navy builds redundancy into every critical operation. It took me 18 hours of solid work, but I rebuilt everything from those logs clean and accurate, all the way back to the last verified payroll cycle. By Thursday morning, I had a clean payroll file ready for the bank. I hit the transmit button at 0600 hours. The electronic funds transfer went through without a hitch. 14,500 workers would wake up to find their correct paychecks waiting, plus overtime pay for the days they'd lost sitting in the parking lot. Friday morning, I walked into Preston's office. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. "It's done," I said. "Everyone's been paid correctly, including compensation for the strike days. Where's Stephanie?" "Reassigned to marketing research." Turns out family connections only go so far when you cost the company millions of dollars and nearly trigger federal investigations. Preston gestured toward the corner office with windows overlooking the equipment yard. "Your new office had them put in a new coffee machine." I sat down in the leather chair and looked out at the construction sites coming back to life. Cranes moving, trucks rolling out with full crews. Sarah texted me, "Dad, got my paycheck. Everything's perfect. Proud of you." That night, Linda and I sat on the porch with a bourbon, watching the sunset. "So what did you learn from all this?" she asked. "That experience still matters, that some jobs can't be reduced to spreadsheets and buzzwords, and that when you're responsible for people's livelihoods, you better know what you're doing." Listen, if you're over 50 and working in any technical field, you've probably seen this movie before. Some young hotshot with an MBA and a PowerPoint presentation thinks they can replace years of hard-earned expertise with the latest software solution. They talk about efficiency and cost savings while ignoring the human cost of getting it wrong. Here's what I want you to remember. Your experience isn't obsolete. It's irreplaceable. The institutional knowledge you carry, the problems you've solved, the crises you've weathered, that's not something you can download from the cloud or learn in a classroom. Stand your ground. Document what you can, but don't apologize for what you know. And when the inevitable disaster strikes, be ready to step up and show them how it's really done. Because at the end of the day, competence beats credentials every single time.